Today we are going to talk about Tabcmd. My name is Ciaran Flynn. I am a senior product consultant with the Tableau team here in London. And I'm going to tell you a bit about myself before I get started. But before I get there, how many people have used Tabcmd before? Okay. And the rest, obviously, you haven't used it before. Cool. So a little bit about me first. I love football, so obviously with the World Cup being on, I'm really excited and really liking it. I love to travel, especially when I can marry that with work and go to places like Greece and Israel and Frankfurt and Amsterdam, these places. And I also really like cats. So I've always had cats in my home. I don't have one right now in London because I don't have space for a cat. But something funny really happened in work where I accidentally changed my corporate photo to a photo with me with a cat on my shoulder. And I obviously don't see this that often because it's in emails to everyone else. But this joke went around and I just decided to keep it. So I've got this cat on my shoulder in my corporate photo. So why am I here? Why do I have the pleasure to present Tabcmd to you guys today? So the initial reason why I got into Tabcmd and decided to build out content and deliver it to customers like yourselves is I had a desire to learn and understand Tabcmd. I had no idea about Tabcmd before. I had very little experience with command line tools, some programming experience, so I wasn't too fazed by it, but I just didn't know how it would work. So that was the kind of first step for me to get to where I am now, showing you guys about Tabcmd. From there, I've delivered this session around 5 times to different audiences in the US and also here in London. And based on those sessions, I've been able to refine the material, simplify some concepts, break it down to easier levels to understand, put in some good examples of use cases. So hopefully the stuff I'm going to show you today will help you to bring some ideas back to your organizations and take that further and apply Tabcmd to your everyday tasks. So my goals for you for this session today, I want you to try to avoid taking notes. Everything I'm going to show you is available online. So all the materials in this slide deck is going to be available for you to download. So try to avoid taking notes. I've done this before where people have taken so many notes they've missed some key aspects. We're talking about syntax, we might be talking about something else. And then they're frustrated that they didn't catch it. So try to avoid taking notes if possible. You can download the content afterwards. For those Tabcmd newbies in the room, I want you to leave feeling confident. I want you to feel like, okay, I don't need to be fazed by this command line tool that I've never used before. I want you to leave with a feeling of confidence that you can go forward and try this yourself. And for the experts in the room, hopefully there are some inspiration from examples or maybe from each other at the end when we maybe share examples of how it's being used. I know that there are so many different creative solutions that other customers have shared, and if we have some time at the end, we might ask for some of those examples to see what other people are doing as well. Okay, so what are we going to learn in today's session? So we're going to learn about what Tabcmd is and what it does. We're going to find out about configuring Tabcmd as well, how to get started with Tabcmd, some useful tips that will help you build commands but also help you debug and figure things out as you go along, because it's not always going to work perfectly the first time. You've got to figure out why something isn't working, and we'll go through some of them. We'll talk about building those commands. So I spoke briefly just there about the syntax. We can bring the syntax together, showing you the structure, the way the command comes together and how you piece these parts together. And then there'll be an automation piece at the end. So how do I bring multiple commands together into a single executable file that could run a scheduled task of some sort? Okay? So let's talk about what Tabcmd is. So Tabcmd is one of the 2 command line utility tools that Tableau offers. So we have a lot of APIs and we have Tabadmin. So Tabcmd is one of the Tabcmd is one of the other command line tools that we use. And it's used to communicate with Tableau Server, but also Tableau Online as well. It's using HTTP requests to first to log in, to establish that connection, to publish content, or to pull content in, things like that. It's important to know that if you're installing Tabcmd on a non-licensed machine, you don't need to buy an additional license. It's something that you can install anywhere, and you take your license from your laptop or from wherever you're using it usually, and you can apply it to that server. So you don't need to go acquire another license to use it. Okay, so what can Tabcmd do for you? So very basically, the first thing is we can publish new content to the server. So we've got examples of workbooks, data sources. We can also manage existing content. So the likes of creating some projects is something that we could create a new project and make sure that content's published there. We could delete content or refresh extracts, which is one of the most popular use cases that we have. It's being able to trigger that refresh based on something. You can manage the users in groups. So you can add users to groups, you can add users to the overall system, create, delete, modify the groups. And you can sync users also with Active Directory as well, if you want to schedule that in a more customizable fashion. And to give you some ideas of the different use cases that we see, I'll go through just a few here. There's so many. These are the most common that we would see. So obviously, automatic generation of PDF reports. You have a need, or you've come from a legacy system where you delivered reports possibly to your end users, and you want to continue to deliver that service while you bring them maybe over to the Tableau side to show them how to interact and be exposed to interactive content. So automatic generation of PDF reports is something that's quite common. To automate the deployment of content between servers. So I have a few customers that have dev, QA, production environments, and when they have content in different folders, they're lifting and shifting them across and publishing them to different environments. Again, the example I showed before, automatically sync users with Active Directory, that's possible. And refresh the extracts on a more flexible schedule. So we have a lot of customers who will have an ETL task in the data warehouse that will complete, and they want their extracts to refresh, maybe with a buffer of 10 or 15 minutes, but they want it to refresh soon after that ETL load happens, okay? So that's something really, really common. And the last one I've seen more recently is customers having a web portal. They might select some parameters, and then they'll generate some output from a web portal. Now this can also be achieved with APIs, and a lot of the things that you see here, most of the things will be achievable with the API, but there's still a very strong case, and our development team is still focusing on providing functionality, new functionality to Tabcmd. So it's important to kind of keep talking about it, and I've had conversations with them about this. Okay, so where do you find Tabcmd? So every install of Tableau Server will come installed with Tabcmd. So you'll find it in this directory here. So your bin directory, your binary directory of your Tableau Server. It'll look something like this. It'll just be an executable file inside this directory. Okay. Or it can be downloaded as a standalone. So I mentioned there before that you can run it on a separate machine, and you can have it without needing an additional license. You can run it on that separate machine and have that work from there as well. You download that from the server section, and you come down to Tabcmd for Server. You'll notice that it's the smaller file size. You don't want to download the entire package for Tableau Server if you're going to run this just separately. Okay. So a lot of people, especially in the US, talk to me about Mac and having Macs and wanting to run Tabcmd from Macs. We don't officially have a version for Mac, but there are some blogs and partner videos that have been created to take the jar files from Tableau Server and to bring them across into a Mac environment and make it work completely fine. Of course, this is something that is unsupported by Tableau, but is very stable as well at the same time. I've done tests, and it's quite stable and quite good. What about on Linux? So nothing has changed. Of course, it comes pre-installed with Linux. Depending on the distribution type that you will use, there will be different packages that you can download, so you can use either of those. If you're running it on a standalone machine, it will still be there for your default install of Tableau Server. Okay, so how to get started with Tabcmd. So obviously we're going to open up command prompt and we're going to start to enter commands through that. As a best practice, we try to run it as administrator, just in case there's some file location that is requiring admin privileges. Running it as admin will just give you full access. It's kind of like sudo in Linux, if you have that access available. And then you'll see again here just the different file paths. So the file path above will be when you have it installed with Tableau Server, and the bottom one is if you install it separately as a standalone piece. You will have to establish a server session with your Tableau Server or your Tableau Online environment, and that can be achieved using this type of syntax here. So you've got your Tabcmd login, you define your server or your Tableau Online name, your site name, your username, and your password. Okay, so we're going to go through this in a second in the demo part. One important thing to note is Windows path variable. Does anyone use Windows path variable? Does anyone understand the concept? Yeah, some people. So Windows path variable, it's again something useful. It's defining an environmental path so that you don't always have to go to the folder where the executable file sits. No matter where you are in your command line, you can set this variable so that you can just call Tabcmd from anywhere. Okay? And I'll go through that just now, just to show you where you configure that. And again, all the details are going to be here and available for you so that you can take it back and practice with it. But I'll show you that now as we go into just this demo piece here. So let me just go into my control panel. Does that look okay? Yeah, cool. I'll come into System, Advanced System Settings over here. And I want to come down to this environment variables piece. Okay? And it's all very straightforward. So you've got your user-defined variables above. So this might just be for your user. Or you can define system-wide variables that every user on the system will be able to run. And you just got this path variable. So this will work for multiple applications. It's not just for Tabcmd. Any command line tool, you'll see here, I've got a Fabudi mail client, which I'll show you towards the end with one of my batch scripts, defined there. So you just need to edit this variable, and you'll be able to find where Tabcmd sits. So I've got my folder here, linked, my binary folder, to say, this is where you're going to find your Tabcmd. So if I write Tabcmd, it'll search this and find, okay, I've got it in that binary folder. I do not need to restart now. Okay. Cool. So that's really, really useful. Okay, so now that I've got that ready, let's go ahead and, actually I can just use this window. I've already got open, so I was practicing here. Okay, so we can do, if I come in and just take my login. So I've got, for the purposes of this session, I've got all the commands that we need written out. I've done this before where I've written them freehand, and the potential for a lot of error is quite high, so it's easier just to take these from a already tested and trusted notepad and copy them into the command line. So that first one that I want to talk about is just our login piece. So you can see that here. If I scroll, this might be a bit clearer. So we've got Tabcmd login. I've got Tableau Server installed on my laptop, so I'm using localhost on port 80. I've already got a site created called London 18, which I'm going to use for this entire presentation. My username is admin and my password is admin. Extremely secure. No one's ever going to break in. So if I hit enter, we will get that feedback to say, okay, we're creating a new session, we are connecting to server, and we are signed in and succeeded. Okay? So that's just the first step. You will not be able to execute any commands. Yeah.
Is there a possibility to, if I don't want to share the password, so let's say that other people might want to run it?
Yeah, this is the next one. Yeah, absolutely. So So this is us, we have to establish that connection. We have to make sure that that is there. We can't start running commands without having that session there. And as the gentleman just pointed out there, we may want to not expose that password in the script, but we may want to put that somewhere that is in maybe a secure location. So you do have the ability to point towards a password file, which would be a text file that could be in a secure location that I could reference to pull my password in and establish that connection. And I can do that now. So if I just do Tabcmd log out, just to break that session. So I'm signed out, and I'll copy this one. Yeah. Okay, so we're referencing same site, same username, but I'm just saying, go get the password from this file. And I have the same successful connection message back from me. Okay, so let me just jump back into the deck here for a moment. Okay, so before I go on and show you more of the useful commands, because we've just shown you login at the moment, let's just talk quickly about the syntax. So I mentioned that S will always be that server URL or that online URL. Your U will be your username and T will be site ID. And there'll be a whole host of other options that you can pass, and you'll find them all at this link. Again, this deck will be made available to you. Versioning, you should always try to match your version of Tabcmd with the version of server. I myself have experienced some very small errors with certain commands because I have a mismatch between the version of server and my Tabcmd version. So it does happen. You might get away with it because you're not using a certain command or something changed in the code. Always try to have a match between them. And there's the save password piece that we can look at and reference back to. So it's in this document for you when you take it away. And then you've got your permissions and tasks. So if you are trying to do something with Tabcmd that you are unable to do on Tableau server through the GUI, you're just not going to be able to do it. So Tabcmd, again, is making those HTTP requests. So if you can't do it on the GUI, you're not going to be able to do it with Tabcmd. So those roles and permissions are inherited and will be enforced through Tabcmd. So when you're in Tabcmd, and almost like a lot of command line utilities, you will be able to type in help. So Tabcmd help, and you'll get help right away in the browser available for you. So syntax pieces, commands you could use. You could become more specific, so I could write Tabcmd help publish, and it'll give me options just about publishing. So it'll be more concise for you. And again, I've left a link in there so that you can reference the website and get more information about that. One thing that I probably end up debugging and fixing the most, more than anything else, is the ASCII definition. So it's when you need to pass a special character through the HTTP piece. So for example, if I am trying to, and this will come up in one of the examples I show later, but if I want to apply a filter to a dashboard export, ship mode, and ship and mode are separated by a space. It's not going to be understood that that space is a space. It's going to be almost like a break, and I need to put in %20 instead of that space. And there's a whole host of different examples, underscores, stars, or asterisks, that you will have to change if they exist in your file name or your filter name. Anything that you pass that's going towards Tableau server, you may need to define it as the ASCII definition as opposed to the regular character that we see and that we use. Okay, so I'm going back into the command line. And now we're going to start to create some projects and publish some content. So I hope you guys can see that all. I can make this available to you as well on the website to download if it's useful for you. But the first thing I'm going to do is, my server, if I show it to you, is actually completely empty. So I've just got the default folder, which I'm unable to delete here anyway. It's got no workbooks, no views, no data sources. There's no users and groups. Just the admin and just all users groups. So we're going to start to populate this Tableau server environment with some content and some users eventually as well. So I'll take this create project and we'll just go through these. So create project, drop it in. you can see I'm giving it a name. Okay, I've got this weird link washington.edu piece. This is actually me applying an image to the project so that it gives it some context. I think in this case it's just a Tableau logo, and it was the one that fitted best, so I just used this link. So if you put it, the D is meaning description, and if you put in exclamation mark at the beginning and end, it makes it an image. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that's also possible. So we'll go ahead and create that project. And just jump back really quickly and refresh our site. So we've got our Tabcmd folder, our project, with the logo here. And just to show you that example, if I go into details, there's that link that I put in, the description. So I'm able to put in that context, that image, just to make it more relevant and familiar to people if I need to. Okay, so now that we've got that project created, let's start populating that project with some content that my users will want to use. So I'm just going to use the regular Superstore workbook that you all have, and I'm going to just, so I've got a folder. Actually, I should probably show you the folder here. So I've got a folder. This will be my exports folder, but I'm not going to use this one right now. Actually, I can delete these ones because we're going to do new ones. But I've got my Superstore workbook here, some data sources, some users. This is where I'm going to pull all the information from to publish to the server. Okay, so these are all this is just my source of all this content that I'm going to publish. So I've got my Superstore workbook. I'm going to name it Tabcmd, and it's going to go into the project Tabcmd. I'm going to name it Superstore. Okay. This step could take a while. I'm publishing this with the data, so it's a TWBX. If you've got a large amount of data, that step is going to take some time. So just be aware of that. In this case, it wasn't a huge file, so it's not too bad. But you'll see here that I've got no workbooks. But if I jump in, I've got my Superstore available for me. And this is the workbook that I'm going to use for the remainder of the session with regards to exporting and interacting with. So that's now published. Let's go in and let's do an export. So that first popular use case that I spoke about, the exporting to PDF, that command, if I make this a little bit, that command here is simply export from the site London. This is the piece here, in the quote, Superstore overview. This is part of the URL, so if you want to get this or you want to know what is this and where does it come from, if you jump into this and click into your, this one here, you'll see it in the browser up here. So it'll be this piece here. Okay, so that's what you need to reference. You need to reference the content piece. And I want to specify that it'll be a PDF. So did I copy that one across? So I want to specify that it's a PDF, and I want to put the file name, so everyone can see it, and I want to put the file, it's the PDF to this location, so my export Superstore. So you saw me just delete content from there from a previous dry run, but if we look at our export folder really quick again, it's completely empty. We're going to start to populate this with some content. I can go ahead and perform that export. So connecting to my previous session, looking for that piece of content and outputting it as a PDF. And here it is. So my dashboard, the way it would look in the browser, just give me that PDF. Now, I recognize that it's not always the overall dashboard that you want to output. You might want to apply some filters. So we have examples where we can apply filters. So here's an example here. If we drop it into the command line and take a look at it. So you can see that I'm saying Superstore overview, and I'm passing that URL argument for filters. So the question mark region equals west. So I want this output to be a PDF just for region west. So go ahead and hit that. And we'll just look at the two side by side, and we'll see immediately the difference between them. Cool, so if I go across my exports, I've now got a Superstore West available for me If I open this, we've now just filtered the entire dashboard to the west. And it looks different to my original one, which was the entire US in this case. So you can see sales up there, 2.2 million as a KPI number, and then the west is just 700K. So this is really, really useful. Okay, so what's the next one there we've got? So what if we want to create more complex filters or multiple filters? It's also worth pointing out that you don't actually need to have the field in the view to filter by. I've actually done this test where I've not used the field, let's say region or ship mode, and I've still been able to filter on that. As long as it's part of the data set, I can filter that. So you can programmatically have this work for you. This example here has two filters and that space-based ASCII definition that we had to include. So we have region equals west, same as before, ampersand, ship mode, and both ship mode and the value of ship mode has a space. So we have to define that as %20, the ASCII definition. Okay, so we're going to just look at everything on the west with the ship mode first class, and we want it to be a PDF. Okay, it's done now. Come across, and now we've got our third file exported, which is Superstore first class. Probably should have called it West as well. And this is now condensed again. You remember that the West-based filter was 700K. This is now 129K. I could do this for multiple outputs if I want to. This is something that can be quite useful. Yeah?
Filters, if you looked at in the Tableau workbook server,
Yeah.
and you apply them, you don't see that in the top URL.
On the URL.
Yeah.
If you pass, you can actually just drag and drop. You could take that URL and put in.
If you interact with the filters on the dashboard, you don't see it. So you'd have to just try it, typing it in.
Yeah, you'd have to type it in, and that's where the trial and error and figuring those things out. You kind of have to do it.
Does it work with, is it only with a TDD type connection?
No.
Can it be any
Yeah, as long as it's part of that semantic layer, the TDS. Okay, so we know that PDFs aren't the yeah.
Can we export not the vertical view, but the whole workbook and pass the same parameter for all views in the workbook and to download it as a one PDF on the separate sheets or something?
I think you'd have to do a combination of the PDFs and concatenate them together somehow. That's the way I think it would work. I'm not sure about that one. I'll get and check on it for you though afterwards. Just to get in the kind of sake of time, we might do some questions at the end if we just get through the content. There's a few more things to show, but no, you're fine. I'll answer. I'll look into it afterwards for you. But we've also got the ability to export these package workbooks. So imagine you're in a scenario where you have your end users that started using from a legacy system, let's say PDFs. And now you want to bring them along on a better journey where they have interactivity through a package workbook. They say they already use Tableau, they've got Tableau desktop. You say, okay, I'll give you a Tableau workbook and see if you can interact with the content a bit better. So you can do that as well. You can export. It's a little bit different to the PDF because you'll notice that the command we're using is get as opposed to export. So don't get confused about that. You will have to use the get command to pull a workbook from the server. That's something that throws people off a couple of times. So we can do that as well. That was pretty quick. Come across to our exports and that is there. So there's no need to open that. It's exactly the same as the workbook that I published. And then we've got the extracts. So my server has workbook there with a couple of worksheets. I want to put a data source there. So you mentioned the extract. This is going to be a TDSX, so I've got a reference to the actual underlying data source. So you could apply filters to that as well. But this example here, I'm going to publish. And what I've got is, I'm going to embed a username and password. So where the database is coming from. I'm going to say db password test and save the db password, which is essentially embed that password in that data source so that I can perform extract refreshes. So I'll go ahead and hit that. And that will get published to server. And now what I can do is if we go across and look at this, if I come across, we've got that data source available to us here. So this last, I tried to do the refresh here to see if it will work, but that last refresh said it was back in 2017. I keep using this file from ages ago and deleting it off the server, but if we try to do a refresh, let's see if we can change that date to be today. So again, Tabcmd refresh, I specify the data source and the project that it exists within. This is that really cool feature that you could incorporate with an ETL process. And it says succeeded, so maybe we've had some luck. And if I refresh this page, didn't update. This sometimes, yeah, this is a bit of a funny one, depending on where I present and if I've got connection to my VPN. It says succeeded sometimes, I don't sometimes see it, but that is the command anyway. This refresh extracts, okay? Okay, so I'm going to jump back into the slide deck here now for a moment. And all the commands I just showed you, even though I can make that file available to you, they're all existing within this slide deck. So you have them all here. And I've broken it out into explainable pieces. Again, I've highlighted the ship mode and the ampersand and the question mark, so it's very clear. So we don't have to go through all of these again. Here's the refresh extracts that we just spoke about. The next piece is all focused around the users. So creating users, adding them to groups, the syntax required. So for those of you that have done this before, this might be familiar. This is the example from the website where this is the format, this is the CSV format that you need to have the users in order to have them understood by Tableau Server so that they can be created. So you've got username, password, their name, their role type, whether they're an admin or a site admin, and then do they have publishing rights as well. So the definition of all of these I've defined here so that you can see. One thing to note, for those of you that are on 2018.1, this field here is exactly the same. So if you're using the creator, the explorer, those type of licenses, viewer, you just need to put them in here. If you're still on pre-2018.1 where the role changed, you just continue using interactor viewer. Okay? So just to make that clear. And then there's creating a batch file. So we'll speak about this one in a little while, but this is where we'll be able to bring those multiple commands together so that we create something that could be scheduled or that could be executed on a job completion, and it'll be within the notepad. We'll build this example out as well. Something important to note, when you are creating that batch file, and I'll go through this in a second, we have to specify .bat as the extension type and save as type as all files. Otherwise, it'll still be a TXT file. Okay, so let's look at the users that we have. So user management here. So I don't, like I showed you at the beginning, I don't have a sales group. I don't have users. So I'm going to take all of these pieces and pull them onto the server. So the first thing I want to do is I want to define my groups. And this is probably, in many cases, what you should do at the beginning of any Tableau Server install is define your groups first. Define permissions against groups, and then afterwards add your users after you've done some testing with the roles and the permissions that they should have. So we'll go ahead and create the sales department group. And that's successful. Just jump across to make sure it's there. So we've got that sales department available for us now. I'm going to create site users. So this is going to be creating users on the system. So this user CSV, it might be worth showing you that file so that you get an idea as to what it looks like. It's exactly the same as the syntax I showed you previously. So it looks something like that. It's a CSV, there's no headers, remember that. And I can just go ahead, reference this, and create those users from that CSV. I've run this test on thousands of users before. It can take some time if you're putting on a lot of users, but in this case, 4 users was instantaneous. And we'll just check again to see if those users made it to the server. So we've got Alan, Fred, Henry, and Michelle all there on the server. The next command is actually deleting some users from this user list. And the syntax is exactly the same for that delete users file. We're just going to use a different command. So in my folder, I've got my delete users, CSV, and I've just specified 2 users I want to delete from the system and the details about them. I'm just going to say, okay, drop those guys from the server. So I'll go ahead and delete site users, take them away from the server, so I'll end up only with 2 users on the server. So refreshing this page will bring me just the 2 users. Okay, so now the last thing with users, I just want to add those users to a group. So I've created a CSV that is sales department users or sales department group, and I want to add those users to that group I created just a moment ago. So I'll bring this in and copy that into the command line. And now that group will be populated. So it's going to always give you feedback. If there's some users that didn't get added for whatever reason, it's going to say successful to, failed to. So you'll always know if something's gone wrong or not. Okay, so let's move on to this batch example. So this is where it's really interesting. The last 20 minutes or so was just looking at the commands individually, just so you have an idea and that you can see it's pretty straightforward to build them. But creating a batch file and having this come together is really where it becomes quite useful. So I've already got these commands here, and it consists of my okay, so I've got to establish a login. Okay, even though I've already got a session on my laptop now established, but I'm going to do a login, I'm going to create a project, I'm going to publish some content, I'm going to do an export, and then I'm going to log out, all in one step inside a batch file. So in order to do so, I'm going to take the entirety of that batch file, and we've got another one here to show you in a moment. I'm going to just go into Notepad and paste that in. Okay? And I'm going to save this to that location. So I can put this one in here, and I can call this batch example, and I'll just say live. Again, remember, I've got to name that .bat as well, but I've got to do all files, come back here, I've got to do BAT. Otherwise, it's not going to work, so just remember that. I'll zoom in so you can see that there. So batch example live.bat, save file type as, all files, or save as type, and I just go ahead and save that. Now if I go ahead and navigate to that directory, I've got my, yeah, that's it there, this one. I can just go ahead and double click this and run it. So the entirety of that script will run sequentially, one command after another one, all together, which will give us a connection established, publish content, export content, and then log out as well. Not a great example of a use case, but just to show you a combination of commands that we've run through in the past 20 minutes and how easy it is. So that's now complete, and it will be available in my exports folder. So I've got the pieces there, batch export.pdf. Nothing special, it was just the West example from before. Now I've got a cool example that went down really well when I was showing this presentation in the US in Vegas last year. So we have this command line, okay, this command piece here, but I'm actually combining it with an email client. I've also done this before with a text-based SMS client where I've attached an MMS message with a screenshot of the dashboard. Some customer wanted to do that before, and I was able to show them how to do it. And this Tabcmd mail, you might remember that from the environment variables path that I set. I also had to set it here for this purpose. But essentially I'm combining two tools together in a single batch file so that they can work in harmony together so that I can do everything in one step. So this script here will log in, export some content, then create an email, specify who I want to send that email to, attach that export, and then log out. Okay? So we're going to see the entire process work for us here. If I go ahead and take this, and like I said, this could be with an alerting tool that you might use. I think Slack you could also do something with. I did it with MMS before with phones. So this is quite useful. So again, I'll jump in and create a batch file. I'll save this as my email batch live.bat. Change this to be all files. Save that. Now, we should get a notification up on the screen when we run this. So if I go ahead and if I double click on my batch example live, or yes, my batch example live, no, this is not the right one. It was email batch live, rather. I've set up my Google Mail add-in to pop up a notification here with a sound, which should work. So that's logged out. So this might take a second. Sometimes it takes a while. Bear with me. So this is our export that comes from the email. Okay, so you've your Tableau export. It's come in here, and I can open this up, and I've got my Superstore PDF available to me. Just an example, but what I want you to take away is that you can combine it with other pieces or other tools that you might have that you use within your business. One other useful piece, and I've just built this previously that I can show you now, we still have some time, is I do have a create all batch file. So if I look at this batch file, this is an example where I might want to, in one step, completely create an entire Tableau server environment without having to go through and click everything. So you can add groups, you can add projects, you can add all the icons for the projects. I'm actually creating a site at the beginning as well. I'm defining all these data sources. Now the data source is exactly the same, being duplicated just for simplicity purposes. But this is just a big script where it could be as long as you want here. It doesn't have to be this short. But this is just an example to populate a complete new site from scratch. And if we just go across to my Tableau server, we don't have this site yet. So it's going to be, I think, company name _ company name or something will appear here when I click it. So I'll just come in and do create all batch. And this will take a while because there's a lot of steps it's going through. Some of the publishes take longer than others. Some of the steps take longer than others, depending on what it is. But this will just run through. This could be useful if you're just getting started, or if you want to not necessarily create a backup, but to create a snapshot, a template of your server environment. If you were going to use different servers for different people, but with the same template. I know I've got some customers that have scenarios like that, where they actually buy Tableau server and install on their client side, as opposed to making it available as a service to them. So this will run through. That site is probably already created, so if we do a refresh, we'll be able to see that. So it's this one here, company name. I think the projects are already created, so I've got all these with some familiar logos for my different teams. And it's still publishing some of the, I guess, the data sources. So some of these data sources, 6 now. If I click it, it's now on 10. It's publishing everything for me. It's giving it all different name. Could be really useful like that. Okay. Okay, so the examples here again, you've got your batch file information here. We want to talk about really quickly the last thing about the batches is creating that automation piece. And this is something that I've included because somebody asked about it at the end of the first presentation that I did it, is the ability to schedule. So I was talking about triggering and having your own custom schedule for this batch file. Windows machines have this task scheduler already available to you. These are the steps that you will follow to go through it. I'm going to show you now how to do that. But just to know that they are there for you, I'll jump in and just show you that. So if I come into, just task scheduler. So if I come into task scheduler here, that doesn't really show. Didn't know that would work. Okay. So task scheduler is the Windows tool that comes pre-installed that you can schedule tasks essentially to run on a particular event. And what you want to do is you want to come over to the right hand side and create a task. And you've got this dialog, you give your task a name. It could be send email with attachment. You give it a particular trigger, so you might say, you might define this trigger yourself. Oh, it's gone a bit slow here now. Now it's not responding. Okay, here we are. So this is on a schedule, I could say, on a particular cadence that you might want. Or it could be on startup, these are like Windows-based tasks, but you could say on an event. And if you were able to trigger an event from your application to perform this Tabcmd Tableau piece, you could do that. So you could say, taking an input from a database after a load has been made, for example, from SQL Server, you could trigger an extract refresh. Then you can have your actions, which is where you're going to select that batch file that you created. So you're going to say start a program, and then you're just going to browse towards that directory where you have your batch file, select your batch file, and that's your action for that particular task. And that's more or less it. There's a lot of other settings there, and there's other tools that you can use as well. You're not limited to using the task scheduler in Windows. You may have other task scheduling tools within your organizations that you can use as well. Yeah, there's some other options in there as well. Okay, so let me jump in here. Okay, so that was more or less the content I wanted to cover in this session. What I want to just have a quick summary over what we've covered in that very quick and kind of very condensed way. So we looked at what Tabcmd, what it does. We looked at the configuring of Tabcmd, how to start using Tabcmd. These are all of the things at the beginning that we were mentioning, the useful tips, the building commands, the automation piece there at the end, and bringing that together in a batch file. What I hope you take away from this is, for the newbies, that there's a I can do this attitude. I'm not afraid of this way of doing things. For the guys that have used it before, I hope that you may have got some inspiration, some ideas. Before, I've had people in the room who've used Tabcmd extensively. They didn't know about the task scheduler, so that was pretty cool for them. And what I ask for you when you go back to your offices, either tomorrow or on Monday, is try to think of an example. So if you have an example now, whether it's the exporting of PDFs with some filters or creating an extract refresh based on some job completing, try to think about what those actions are you're going to take away from this session. I hope that there's some inspiration there, there's some ideas you might have, and just don't be afraid to try it. It's quite easy. The syntax can be funny, but hopefully the content that I've given you and the resources online will be able to help you. And the last thing I would ask you to do is fill out the survey, which I'm sure you've already done for other sessions already, but I'd really appreciate it. It will help me improve my content and make it more relevant for future audiences. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your attendance and your patience today. If you have any questions, I'm going to hang around here to answer your questions. If you want to stay and speak out and give examples also, sometimes that happens and people love that as well. So thank you very much.